So good morning and thank you so much for being here. Te quiero dar la bienvenida a Torito y saludos a nuestra gente en Puerto Rico. Me llamo Medina Lichtenstein, soy la directora ejecutiva de Enlace de Familias en Holyoke, Massachusetts. Antes de procesar, I'm sorry, translation. Let me start there. ¿Hay alguien aquí que necesita traducción? ¿No?
¿De qué idioma?
Perdone.
¿De qué idioma?
¿De qué idioma? De inglés a español. Si podemos, we're going to proceed in English, if that is okay with everyone. And I'm not sure how that will work for our folks who are going to be joining us from Puerto Rico, but I will leave that to the IT department and Centro. So welcome. As you heard, Edwin Melendez has given us a very large charge, and we have probably less than the 75 minutes que Don Carlos allowed us. Today, we have a group of panelists that have been doing amazing work throughout the states and in Puerto Rico. And they will speak about how they have been able to create policies that have created community impact. We're going to have this session in 3 sections, and I'm going to try to be a good timekeeper. So panelists, as I shared with you, I'm going to give you 4 minutes apiece and shut you down because we definitely want to have interaction from those that are here. The first is that, again, our charge today is the nonprofit sector and grassroots. We're going to hear about how is it that advocates in their communities have been able to impact the policy or legislation. The other one that we're going to be able to welcome, what we're going to do is after they conclude their presentations, we're going to go into a Q&A with those that are here. And I will say this to you, we all have our story. You are here because you probably have been doing amazing work in your community. What we'll not be able to do during our 70 minutes here is to be able to speak about everything that is going on in each of your communities. So I will ask you, please, to hold long-term comments and sharing your story, but to do a Q&A to be able to take advantage while the presenters are here. There will be the rest of the day that you will be able to have discussions with them in the hallways and during other sessions. And then lastly, what we will be doing today is creating some focal points to be able to report out at the end of the day in terms of recommendations. What is that is said here today by the presenters? What is it that we think can be replicated in other communities, in your own community? And how is it that we're going to be able to keep those that are here connected to one another to be able to keep the movement going? Before I introduce the presenters, I would like to know who is in the room, as we all would. So if we could do a very quick, and I mean quick, your name, city, and state that you're representing, and also your affiliation. We're going to do this really fast, speed dating. Ready? Go.
Okay. Hello, Elizabeth Abraham. I live in New York City, and I've been volunteering for my concerns in Puerto Rico. Yo soy del pueblo de Guayama.
Thank you so much.
Hector Cordero CUNY.
Yolanda Cruz Martinez. I'm from New Rochelle, and I'm a clinical social worker, behavioral health.
Thank you.
Maria Roman, New York, National Puerto Rican Agenda.
Lilia Diaz, Jersey City, New Jersey, Puerto Rican Social Community Organization.
Katie Dominguez, Bronx, New York, representing Norwood, Bronx.
Thank you.
Mary Dominguez Otilio, East New York,
Presente, gracias.
Rita Quadralash, New York City, formerly Executive Director of Familias. María Soto Vega, was PhD candidate at Syracuse University, original de San Sebastián.
Thank you.
Ignacio Rivera, an attorney, affiliated as a volunteer with the Puerto Rican Action Board, trying to create also a disaster relief.
Alma Collazo, living here in New York, raised in Mayagüez, and social. I'm from New York City, and I'm a mentor alum.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm Jessica Rivera Walker, New York City, and I'm a mentor alum.
Thank
del Valle, artista y activista, Pregones Theater, and Eco Kids Puerto Rico.
Thank you. Gracias.
Tamaya Figueroa, graduate sociology student at St. John's University.
Faster.
Mitch Villar, I'm from the East Harlem Community Navigator Program at the Children's School of Social Work.
Elsa Rios, New York City, Strategies for Social Change.
Emily Lopez, social worker.
Amy Cordova, I'm from the Lower East Side. I'm
Welcome.
Torres, Lehman College. Renato Rocha, Washington, D.C., Unidos, U.S., formerly NCR.
Melissa Frankie from Policy Alliance.
Claudia Gonzalez, New York, entrepreneur and resident at Middle Creek.
Felix Martinez, professor of the University of Wisconsin.
Manuel Alonso, I'm the library manager at the Centro Puerto Rican Studies Library and Archives.
Faster. Let's go.
Iris Garcia, assistant professor, University of Utah.
Nestor Rios, New Jersey.
Alisa Stankic, professor University of Columbia.
Elizabeth, New York City, Lower East Side, and peer candidate at LL.M.
Freddy Vasquez Rodriguez from the South Bronx, from the South Bronx.
Carmen Razi, undergraduate at NYU. And I'm from San Juan.
Thank you for coming.
Reverendo William Rosa, New York, the Help Save Puerto Rico initiative. We're in this for the long haul.
Charlotte Bassett Navarro, New York Immigration Coalition.
Sandra Arroyo, I just moved from San Juan, and I'm from
Robert Romero, Latino Democrats, born and raised here a few blocks, Poughkeepsie, New York.
Thank you.
Right
here.
Caceres Rivera Keys, grad student at UMass Boston, representing Gaston Institute.
Right behind you. I'm sorry.
Miguel Luciano, artist here in Barrio, professor at School of Visual Arts.
Vivian Coffey, and I'm representing Dare to Revitalize Education through Arts and Mediation.
Thank you.
In the northern section of the Bronx.
Bronx.
Barbara Vajidas, Manhattan, I'm the project and operations manager, and I've been acting on to make small amounts of supplies.
Leslie Hernandez, executive director of Manufacturing de Luisa Díaz.
I'm Martin Garcia, history teacher, Georgia City, and the actor.
Thank you. Tanya Paskey, Manhattan.
Ed Ortiz, New York City, call to action.
Edmundo Quiñones, Colón, Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Hunter Island.
Nancy Marcus Johnson, I'm with the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, and I'm from Suffolk County.
Thank you. I already did this one. Awesome.
Walter Alomar, president of the Organization for Culture of Hispanic Origins, New York, New Jersey, director of the film Colonization and Extinction.
Sarah Molinari, graduate student at the CUNY Graduate Center.
Centro Puerto Rican Studies, New York.
Thank you very much. That was very fast. We're going to start going through introductions right now, and what I want to ask the panelists to do is introduce themselves, do their presentations, and then the next one will go just so that we could move this very quickly. It's a large group, and I want to be able to leave the time for the Q&A.
I love the efficiency. My name is Federico Jesús. I'm founder and principal of FDJ Solutions. That's a consulting firm based in DC. I'm an activist at heart, and recently I co-founded a group called Boricua Activate. Basically, we are a 501c3 and a 501c4 dedicated to empowering the community to educate them on how to advocate before Congress. We started a couple of months ago, but the hurricane really moved this fast forward. We're already fundraising, and we're setting up education shops in Unidos US. We'll have more news for that next month. So basically, we're 5 million strong, and like Edwin said, if we don't unite the diaspora to advocate before Congress, we're not going to get this done. The main point we're trying to promote is having, first of all, we started with a Facebook Live message in front of Capitol Hill, asking people to call their members of Congress for emergency relief for the hurricane victims. And how did it result into action? A lot of people just thought, well, we'll get a couple of $1 billion in the hurricane money for all the other jurisdictions, Texas, USVI, Florida. But we kept pushing, we kept advocating. We had the first Facebook Live had 89,000 views, and we got a lot more money than we thought. but it's wholly insufficient. So what we're advocating for in a Marshall Plan isn't that controversial, but it's a lot. We need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need healthcare parity. Puerto Rico's healthcare funding is capped, and the hospitals, as you've seen, people are operating with their iPhone flashlights. It's unacceptable. We also need to have economic tools. Edwin made a great presentation on how Puerto Rico is losing population, losing economic activity. If Puerto Rico isn't empowered with economic tools like Jones Act waivers, like economic incentives. Congress is discussing tax reform right now. I'm not a believer that we'll get like one big package of Puerto Rico, here you go. I think that there's a series of bills going through Congress that we need to insert ourselves in. And so what we're doing is posting on Facebook a script. This is the number you need to call for your member of Congress. This is the website you need to go to so you know which senators or members represent your district. This is what you need to say, and this is the follow-up. It's not enough to just call your member of Congress. You need to follow up. Some Puerto Ricans, unfortunately, don't know that we have a right, that they work for us. Some people think that we're asking for a favor. We're asking for what we have as a right as U.S. citizens and human beings. And frankly, the equality message, I don't think is proportional to the problem in Puerto Rico. We don't want to be treated the same as Texas and Florida. They're fine compared to Puerto Rico. We stepped back into like the 30s and 40s when Puerto Ricans were caminando descalzos. People don't have roofs over their heads. Mayors don't even have homes right now in Puerto Rico. So we need the response not to be equal to Texas and Florida, but to be proportional to the damage in Puerto Rico. And I want to mention really briefly about strategy. It's important to have an inside and outside game. I'm an activist, I'm a consultant, I work with media, I also do some lobbying. And it's important to rally the troops. We've had rallies in front of the Capitol, we do protests, we do emails, but it's important to meet with the members of Congress and to see what they have to say and have that inside game as well. So we also met with Mitch McConnell and Senator Schumer and a lot of other people, and we let them know that this is a human issue and they need to respond. And, you know, I'll be frank, I'm a Democrat, but we need to help work with Republicans on this and appeal to their better angels. We need to protest, we need to activate, but they need to know why it's in their best interest to help Puerto Rico. So anyway, I'll let the rest of the information flow in the Q&A, but I'm really happy to be here and hope to answer all of your questions.
Excuse me. My name is Jim Carr, and I was actually raised in public housing a couple of blocks from here. My family's from Ponce and Jauco, and I've been in Washington, D.C. for many years. I was a government exec. I was a colonel in the Army Reserve, and I was responsible for the Postal Service doing a stamp in honor of Roberto.
All right. Retired 23.
So we 21. So you heard Edwin mention this morning Antonio Pantoja and Ron Blackburn Moreno, who heads up National Aspira, told me this wonderful story as Antonio Pantoja is receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the White House by President Clinton. As he's putting the medal around her neck, it's a very sobering, solemn moment. She tells the president, "You need to hire more Puerto Ricanos." That's what she said, which I thought was incredibly gutsy. So in the interest of taking the initiative and going on the offensive of being an activist, I want to tell you very briefly about a program we're going to do in Washington, D.C. on December 2nd. It's actually going to be at Arlington National Cemetery. And we are going to recognize a number of Puerto Ricanos and some other Latinos who are buried in Arlington National Cemetery, because we don't think that the public at large fully appreciates our contributions. No surprise to this group, the flags are red, white, and blue of Puerto Rico and the United States. Lots of our national Latino organizations, including what we used to call NCOR, LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens, their flags are red, white, and blue. LULAC, Council 11041, is sponsoring this walk we're going to do at the cemetery, visiting the graves of Puerto Ricanos. And we're going to honor them. We're going to do a little discussion about each individual at their graves and put a rose on each headstone. And as it turns out, part of what gave me the idea for this, so I've actually been writing a book on the cemetery called Sacred Space, Arlington National Cemetery, and I have a rather robust section on Latinos. So I don't think a lot of people realize that when the airplane hit the Pentagon on 9/11, it was actually a quartermaster unit from Aguadilla that was responsible for recovering the remains of all those killed in the Pentagon on 9/11. This is a mortuary affairs unit dedicated to retrieving the bodily remains, cataloging everything, and treating all the remains in an incredibly respectful manner. So we need to remind the public that we were there for 9/11, and also most of the people in this room are aware of the Congressional Medal of Honor ceremony given for the 65th in Washington, D.C. It was an unbelievable event in honor of the Puerto Several of my uncles served in that unit, and I don't think the American public fully appreciates that. So a couple of the people we're going to recognize as we do an homage to these worthy individuals. One is Captain Maria Inez Ortiz, who is actually a nurse born in Camden, New Jersey, but raised in Bayamon. An Air Force Major General Julio Torres, who was actually originally from Santurce. There was a Medal of Honor recipient, Rocky Versace, who is a POW, and the first POW in the Vietnam War awarded the Medal of Honor, and Marie Teresa Rios, who is actually Rocky Versace's mother. She wrote the book 15 Pelicans, on which the television series The Flying Nun was based. So we're going to visit these graves. We're going to pay our respects. We're going to publicize it to the American public, and it's something we expect will be ongoing, perhaps on a yearly basis.
Jim, question for you. Amazing, and yes, there has been constant attention being put on the efforts and also the lives that people have given up fighting for the United States, being the Puerto Ricans, right? You're trying to bring attention to that, given
Yes.
that many do not recognize the sacrifices and the multiple amount of men and women that have been always front line for this. And is there a plan on being able to bring that full circle, given that it is at the National Cemetery? And what is it that people can do who have either had relatives or they themselves have been vets and participate in that?
Well, there's nothing, in fact, I would encourage people to do something comparable locally. So if you've got a Department of Veterans Affairs cemetery close by to where you live, it would certainly be appropriate to recognize our brothers and sisters who are interred or inhered.
Do you have a website or?
I know, but it will be through LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens. We'll work something out with their national website.
Can I make a comment on that?
Please, sir.
So maybe we can talk offline about partnering, and all those people that visit the graves, they're in Arlington Cemetery, maybe we take them on the hill and lobbies for the hurricane relief package. Honor the sacrifice of action. Oh, and Ronald Blackburn Moreno is on our board.
Right. And actually, we're hoping to get some members of Congress to participate too.
That would be the way, that's again an example of how there's one particular action that's being taken, that then we could participate both on the island and also nationally. Muchísimas gracias, Jaime.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaime Farrant. Spent my life born and raised between Guaynabo and Arecibo. So I've been called San Juanero and Arecibeño most of my life. I come as a private attorney today. I'm a board member at the National Puerto Rican Agenda. And starting on November 6th, I will be working as director for hurricane relief efforts for the Flamboyant Foundation in Washington, D.C. The topic I have today is one that as a lawyer and as a Puerto Rican, it concerns me, and that I think there's plenty of things that could be done, even for those of us who are not lawyers. And partly as we look at the recovery of Puerto Rico, we need to be concerned about the Title III court process that is going on. Just this week was the first hearing after the hurricane, and one of the topics that was discussed during the hearing was whether creditors could have access to hurricane relief money claim to recover part of their financial losses. So this is a very, I think we can't forget that this is going on as Puerto Rico battles goes through its recovery. And the idea that I want to leave with all of you today, and that I would leave for the Puerto Rican government to take with it as well, and I heard that there's several lawyers here, and I'd be happy to work with them afterwards, is the possibility to argue whether Puerto Rican debt can be discharged now in this court proceeding on account of force majeure, or as known in Spanish, fuerza mayor o caso fortuito. This is something that is being discussed around the world. There's a law professor named Nina Dellinger who has written extensively on this topic. And this was one of the issues that was discussed during the Paris Agreement Accords that the current administration is walking away from. So this is something that is being talked about internationally. And now I wanted today to bring it to the case of Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, force majeure is enshrined in the Civil Code, which comes from Spain. So this is a doctrine in Puerto Rico that comes from Spain. Sorry for the non-lawyers who get my spiel of 1 minute law. Under the 1920 Puerto Rico Supreme Court case, Vidal versus American Railroad, force majeure is an event that can't be foreseen or resisted, like the falling of lightning, hail, flooding, hurricanes, enemy invasions, or breaking and entry. So under Puerto Rican law, since 1920, the loss created by a hurricane, and in this case, it would be Puerto Rico's absolute inability to repay the debt, could lead to a judge potentially concluding that Puerto Rico is no longer liable for that debt. But one thing to remember is that Puerto Rico is not a party to the Title III court proceeding. The junta is a part of the proceeding. And the junta, according to PROMESA, does not have a fiduciary duty towards Puerto Rico. I want you to remember that it's not written under the law. So it's up to us to make sure that this is argued. In order and then in a second Supreme Court case from Puerto Rico, AA Properties versus Secretario, for the lawyers, I'm happy to give you citations. In order to avoid responsibility for a lost item due to force majeure, the loss must not have been caused by the debtor and instead must have been caused by natural law, acts of the sovereign, or illegitimate acts committed by a third party. The hurricane would fall under natural law. Now, Puerto Rico is not the only law to consider as we engage in this debate. New York law comes into play as well. As you may remember, and so much has happened that we might forget this, in 2014, former Governor Alejandro Garcia Padilla signed legislation in which Puerto Rico waived its sovereign immunity in order to allow itself to be sued in the courts of New York. So there must be some contracts from 2014 onwards that will have potentially force majeure losses under New York law.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but wasn't that for just that 4 billion bond issue, not for the whole 70 billion?
Might be. I'd have to look more into it. Part is not as easy as just looking at Puerto Rico. It's New York, and that's why we're here to learn and engage with others who are interested in being engaged about this. And in New York, force majeure can be invoked as well under principles of common law or as written in the contract. So, and I have some citations, but I'll leave them for sake of time. This must be raised by the oversight board. In law school, I learned that el derecho es rogado. You don't get what you ask for. So this must be asked, and this is something that needs to be asked now in the light of Hurricane Maria. And not asking it is irresponsible lawyering, in my estimation. And regardless, and it's been very hard researching to find the clauses. For example, as of a couple of days ago, the Government Development Banks of Puerto Rico website is still down from Maria, so it's actually very hard to find the actual contract to see what they discuss about force majeure. So I would encourage the government, if there are Puerto Rico government officials, I'm happy to work with them in finding those clauses and seeing how they can be argued. But regardless whether there are clauses or not, I believe that under Article 7 of Puerto Rico's Civil Code, Judge Swain must look at the devastation caused by Hurricane Maria and resolve whether it is equitable that Puerto Rico spends its rapidly shrinking resources paying its creditors over rebuilding Puerto Rico. And so, and under the principles of equity, I believe there is a reasonable case to be made. There must be some discharge of the debt. Under Puerto Rico's Constitution, its preamble states that Puerto Rico is organized to be a democracy, promote the general well-being, and ensure for present and future citizens the full enjoyment of their human rights. That's what is written as the preamble of Puerto Rico's Constitution. According to Dellinger, who has written, as I mentioned, extensively on force majeure, states have long been considered to have a natural duty of self-preservation. This is the doctrine of international law. After seeing the devastation caused by Hurricane Maria, after seeing the challenges that Puerto Rico and its citizens have to take care of themselves and rebuild their houses, their businesses, and their lives, it is clear to me that if we force Puerto Rico to continue paying its debt, Puerto Rico will cease to be able to self-preserve itself. And so today I wanted to leave you with that thought that both Puerto Rico as a debtor, the island citizens have been devastated, and it is time for the courts to intervene and grant a fresh start for everyone. And this fresh start must allow Puerto Rico to be a functioning democracy that promotes the general well-being and ensures its people the full enjoyment of their human rights. If we fail to do that, the numbers that Edwin shared with us this morning sadly will only be a potential best-case scenario for us. And with that, I'm going to try to sum up my time, and I'll be available for questions. Thank you.
Very informative. ¿Tenemos asociación Puerto Rico on the line? This was another presenter that this morning emailed us and said that because of electricity and internet unavailability, she might not have been able to connect with us. So we're still trying to get her, see if she's able to connect.
Person joining via phone, I'm going to unmute them. So. Okay, our phone participant, who's on the line?
Yes, I'm having a bit of trouble of listening to everyone.
Can you speak louder, please? We cannot hear you, and identify yourself.
My name is Tania in Rosario. I live in Salud.
Whoever's the tech person is sounding through the phone, not through just sounding through the phone, whatever phone is there. And I'm not a tech, so I'm not gonna.
So Hector, you could do it.
I don't know what button. Let the text take care of it.
Bueno, vamos a
It's from here.
Vamos a seguir. Why don't we just continue? Okay, and hopefully they will.
Could everybody speak louder because
It's difficult for you to hear. And I'm going to stand for a minute, see if maybe they could get that person on the phone. I would be remiss to not share with you what we're going through in Massachusetts. And I want to be able to focus in on three things that Edwin spoke about this morning. I give you the litany of lists of people in counseling. People have been traumatized. They are coming basically to be able to meet their most basic needs. But we can't forget that they are going to be experiencing this mental health situation for a very long time, and we need to be sensitive to that, especially when we are working with them. We need to meet them where they are at. They might not come to us with everything that they possibly could. So we're going to have to be able to show a lot of patience with them. Three things that we're going through, and I can speak about Holyoke specifically, but I also can speak about what's going on statewide, is that because FEMA has not turned on the button, as they call it, for housing, because they're still doing their assessment, and because the president did not declare Puerto Rico did not classify it as an entire disaster. People are coming as self-evacuees, and there hasn't been a mass evacuation of Puerto Rico. And him not doing that, people then do not have the right to emergency shelter or emergency housing. And that is happening in Florida, in New York, and in Massachusetts, because these are the three largest communities that are receiving the influx of Puerto Ricans. Yesterday, on a statewide phone call, the director of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services says that she's been in touch with all of the other 2 states and also within the larger cities, Miami, Orlando, Nueva York, and so forth. And they're all suffering from the same thing. They do not have the resources to be able to open up emergency shelters for the self-evacuees. The second thing that we're going through is education. Edwin mentioned it this morning that some children are not being able to enter school. There was a McKinney-Vento Act. This is a federal legislation. It's a statute. Every child has the right to education, even if they are homeless. And self-evacuees right now are being classified as homeless. Every child should be allowed to enter to not only enroll in school without their transcript, without documentation, without a birth certificate, immunization, and also without any kind of school transcripts. That's the McKinney-Vento Act. There's no discussion about that. So if you are having difficulty in your communities getting children enrolled, pull out the McKinney-Vento Act, print it, walk around with it, and get those children enrolled. They must be enrolled immediately. They're usually given between a 24-hour to a 48-hour opportunity to get enrolled. The third thing that we have a major difficulty with is with the Medicaid. As you know, Puerto Rico, traditionally everybody that comes, or most people come, it's with La Reforma. And we received a call early on being told that if people disenrolled in that Medicaid insurance and they enroll elsewhere, of course, La Reforma will be terminated immediately. The issue is that when the person goes back to Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico will rebuild, they might not have access as a new enrollee. And if they do, there might be some reduction of what the kind of medical services that they may receive. Those are the 3 things that we are struggling with. There's other things, of course, but at Enlace, we are a welcome center. I understand that New York just opened their first welcome center here in East Harlem. I'm looking for it. I want to go visit it. And what we do at our site, where is it? It is at Holyoke. Okay, and they're closed today? Yes, they are. Okay. I might stay until Monday. This is one of our staff members. She held down the front desk for the first 3 weeks of the Welcome Center. We are seeing up to 60 families, 60 adults a day. And then again, it's 60 with elders with children. And so Naomi, thank you very, very much. We since have hired a new a self-evacuee, right? Because that's what our position is. That's our job. We must be able to employ these individuals. Something that I forgot to mention is that we got the Department of Early Elementary and Secondary Education, which most of you would consider like the Board of Education, to do a waiver for teachers and professors coming from Puerto Rico for 8 months. Put the teachers and the educators in front of the children that are coming until the end of the school year. During that time, if they choose to stay, then there is going to be help from the local universities, Westfield State and UMass, to get them into courses to be able for them to meet the criteria in Massachusetts, take their MTEL, which is our exam, and they can continue teaching there if that is what their choice is. So that's what we're doing in Massachusetts and Holyoke, and I could talk to you afterwards. I want to be able to open up the Q&A for these specialists around the state of the United States and Puerto Rico. And I am sorry that Taller Puerto Rico has not been able to chime in. She did send her regrets. You could hear her? She could hear us.
Yeah,
wonderful. And if you,
Salud.
Perdona, what was I saying?
Salud.
Thank you. So if you can ask her if she could, you're the one that's in touch with her, if she could ask any questions, or if, I don't know, does she have the capacity to type in?
No, it's over your phone.
Okay, so if you could just, if there's anything that she wants to say, please represent her. Thank you. I'm going to open it up for question and answers, please.
Yeah.
Please state your name again.
I'm sorry. My name is Walter Allamore.
From where?
The organization Culture of Hispanic Origins.
Thank you. Question 2.
Question to the abogado. who and when will the case of force majeure be brought? What court will it be brought to based on the status? Does that matter? And also, is there another avenue due to the odious debt?
So my name is Jaime. I've heard abogado many times, but I like Jaime. This all has to be brought in the Title III proceeding. So what has happened now is that in order to avoid, because after Puerto Rico defaulted, all the creditors started filing individual lawsuits. And that's when Garcia Padilla passed a law trying to create its own Puerto Rico bankruptcy court system, which was the U.S. Supreme Court declared unconstitutional. That's what eventually led to PROMESA. And this creation of this Title III court here. So all this has to be argued in the Title III court case. The only person who can bring this, defense would be the junta. The Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico is not allowed to be a party in this case. The future of Puerto Rico, I never want to not underscore this or highlight this enough. The future of Puerto Rico is not being necessarily advocated for in this court proceeding. They are not a party to this case. So I believe that we as civil society, we as civil society have a role to raise a voice that this changes everything. Like this hurricane changed everything. It's not only a question of we can't pay. Now it's a question of we can't pay, but do you want to force us to pay more money, or do you want us to have a stake? Because if the mission is to empty the island, then by all means, force the government to pay. So I believe we are the ones that are called to raise the voice on our voices to the junta, and I'm happy for the junta to call me and say, Jaime, you are wrong on this. We can't argue it, and let's publicize it. So it'd be great if we could publish more of these contracts. We know what has happened in the last 3 days with the publishing of the whitefish contracts. And so it'd be great if we could publish this more, if we could raise our voices collectively and push for this, because it is the junta who I think can respond to our pressure and to our arguments and make them raise the voice. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Maybe not the answer you were looking for. And you mentioned those. Same answer.
Same people.
Same people. I mean, same people. Sadly.
Can you hear me there?
Who is in control, and who is it that we have to create a force to meet them and make sure that this issue gets resolved? There was a hand up.
The person on the phone is trying to speak.
She is, okay.
She's asking if we can hear her. I can hear her, but I don't think anybody else can.
We can hear her.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Make it an effort to try to communicate.
Yes, and she's been on for a while. She's been ready for this since 8 o'clock this morning.
Let's take that. We can hear the person on the phone in the webcam. Just not here.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just ask my question while we try to figure this out. So with the thought process of trying to unify numbers, I know that there's a lot of talks for November 19th, which is Puerto Rico Discovery Day, to do a unity march down in the Capitol. Is this, are we really seeing this as an effective way? I mean, for me personally, I think it is. I think we come out in numbers because we have to show and we compel people to get out. But for you more so, Federico, who is down there, who is dealing with these policy issues a lot more directly. And like you said, we need to unify both Democrats, because we have them both. We have very much Republican Puerto Ricans and we have Democratic Puerto Ricans. Do we think that that's an effective way to show our numbers? And even Jaime, because I think that with what's going on with the Title III and the junta, my question to you directly is, when is that hearing supposed to be happening, so we know how much time we have to get the word out? But more so for Federico on the Unity March.
Sure. So thank you for your question. There have been scattered protests in front of the Capitol. Elizabeth Warren and several members, including Republicans, spoke before crowds in front of the Capitol. Intelligently, people went to visit their members and other offices in the Senate and the House. So if a lot of people show up, that helps, because the media attention has been very important in this crisis. When the issue of Vieques came up, the fact that there was the largest march on Puerto Rico in the White House on any issue, but it was for Puerto Rico, it was for Vieques in 2000. I was actually arrested for civil disobedience. I'm very proud of it. But there were just 4,000 people there, and it was the largest one. And 4,000 people is a lot in DC. But we saw the Women's March. We're not going to meet those numbers, but there's 5 million of us. And if not all of us can come to DC, they can pick up the phone, they can email their members of Congress, they can keep following up, they can go to Urico Activate and see on Facebook page what they need to say and urge others to do so. But yeah, if everybody shows up, I think it would be great. But the follow-up and what we ask for is that keep protesting isn't enough. We need to have an ask. When you go to your member of Congress, for any issue, not just Puerto Rico, don't just complain, but ask them to do something. Ask them to send a letter, introduce a bill, call an agency, call on the president to do X, Y, or Z, and keep following and persisting.
But Jaime, if we're, excuse me, Federico,
Yeah.
if we're looking at following what she's saying and being able to be unified, what's the ask?
The ask is a Marshall Plan for Puerto Rico. And what does that Marshall Plan include? Investment in infrastructure, including rebuilding the grid, not just to where it was, but so that it can have renewable energy and be self-sustaining, and the electrical lines don't depend on being on top of trees, but are actually underground. To have healthcare funding parity and economic tools for Puerto Rico to really be able to rebuild and prosper after the crisis.
And to answer your question, I don't know the exact date off the top of my head. I'm going to look it up because court dates have been scheduled until December. Okay. And the one this week was in New York. I'm assuming the one next month is going to be in New York as well. I doubt it's going to be in Puerto Rico. So it would be also great if I live in DC, but if people in New York are interested in potentially organizing, that'd be another way to raise collective voices.
And the Junta is meeting in Puerto Rico next Tuesday, and they're probably going to decide on a new fiscal plan, which includes reductions, even further reductions into that. So we should tune into that.
Thank you. There's a hand. Yes, sir.
Okay. I believe this is a fight we can win. Okay? Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I wonder, I don't think we can do this by ourselves. I think we need to involve other Latinos. There's a lot of issues out there. We are part of a larger Latino Hispanic family. And I say that an attack on one is an attack on all. And I've been talking to Ecuadorians, Mexicans, and they say, we'll help, we'll join in, okay? What are we doing to attract them?
So the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, which NULAC is part of, and the National the National Puerto Rican Agenda is also part of, they've sent letters. They've also asked for that Marshall Plan and a 10-point plan, including the Jones Act waiver. And, you know, Jaime was a lawyer. He's very modest, but he was a lawyer in DC in an organization called Ayuda, which is an immigrant rights organization. Luis Gutierrez, who we know, and Nidia Velazquez have been pushing for immigrant rights. And I think that there is solidarity. And it's not enough for groups in DC to just come together and send letters, but if communities from the ground up actually join the effort, then yeah, we can make a difference. And it's not just Latinos. I think a lot of people, I was just on a train ride from DC, someone from Louisiana was telling me, tell me about Puerto Rico, why are we in this situation? What can I do? There are a lot of people that have solidarity towards Puerto Rico that didn't even know we were part of the United States.
Okay, one second question. This might get a little dramatic, but this is for the attorney. Okay.
I'm going to ask you to be quick with that next question.
I'm not an economist, and I'm not a lawyer. Okay, but my question is this: I've looked at as a lay person this economic situation, this debt. Is Puerto Rico facing an extinct level event?
That's a very hard question that I think it's something for us to consider, to really analyze. And so this is just me speaking personally off the cuff. This is a very big challenge for the island and its existence. I think like it's other states, other cities have faced devastation like this. Not many have faced it while bankrupt. And and with their hands completely tied behind their back as to what to do. So one of the things that has been said is, the Puerto Rican government hasn't responded fast enough. And that might, that's something that we can look at moving forward. What I do know is that if I was the governor and I had a bankrupted government and no significant assistance coming from here, even the best of intentions I can't pay for the ambulances to go out. I can't pay for the people to go out and cut trees to get it out. So I do believe that the Puerto Rican government, we had it was expected that Medicaid would collapse in Puerto Rico on the best case scenario, March of 2018. The healthcare system in Puerto Rico now has completely collapsed. So I think we potentially, we have a failing government in the sense of like lacking the resources to lift itself, and I think I'm never gonna call it extinct. I'm a proud Puerto Rico until the day I die. So Puerto Rico will never be extinguished as long as I'm alive. But we have to, it's very hard for the government at this time, even with the best of intentions. I'm assuming best of intentions here, but it's a very hard battle that we need to ask ourselves, what do we do as a country?
I apologize. I know that there's lots of more questions. I'm going to ask you to see the panelists outside of this room. We are supposed to be ending at 12:30. That's right. At 12:45. Awesome. So awesome. I love more time. So we're going to take 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to be able to come to some agreement about what are the 3 priorities that we saw that we're going to be able to, 1, work together on, and 2, unify as an entire Latino community. So let's start there, then we're going to move on.
I think my question is related to your statement. It seems to me that in order to have significant presence in a big DC valley, then some kind of major resolution, resources and buses from all over, we have only 3 weeks. So is that what's going to, something that's going to be coming out of this body, out of this symposium?
We could make that recommendation if that is what
I would
think.
I
Can I follow up on that recommendation? My recommendation was in the Women's March example. They formed specific chapters all throughout the world. And so I feel like that can be the similar model where we can't go to DC, but we can rally people wherever we are across the, across ethnicity.
That is a solid recommendation. I'm going to pause for a minute. I believe that we now, thank you. I believe that we now have Puerto Rico on the line. Can you speak up?
Hola, buenos días. Buenos días.
No, we can't hear her. Some people on our microphone, because she did chime in the Zoom. She first was on the phone. We still aren't able to make that. She had identified that. Hold on, no. Okay, the panel have a question next. Go ahead. Question?
I guess this is for.
Yeah.
So in this movement to propose a Marshall Plan,
Can you speak up? Speak up. Speak up.
Sorry. In this movement to propose a Marshall Plan, which I think is a wonderful idea that works, are you proposing specific content to that inside the Marshall Plan that includes issues of sustainability? That is a participatory Marshall Plan that communities are able to weigh into what is discussed and proposed, that it privileges local small and businesses, that this is not a big effort for big companies in the United States to come and also make a lot of money, which has happened before. So I wonder if this is part of the conversation when you're having a conversation about a Marshall Plan.
So I appreciate the question on the Marshall Plan. So just so you know, from my background really quick, I worked on the Hill for 8 years. I also worked, so I worked on the Hill for about 8 years. I worked in the media, and now I'm an advocate. So in my experience, you need to be sufficiently specific for your ask to get through, but to have enough wiggle room for the policymakers to actually do what they need to do. So Why the Marshall Plan? Number one, because it's a keyword that people recognize immediately. And not only the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, 2 U.S. senators have spoken about the Marshall Plan. So it's getting traction and it's a good buzzword. But yeah, there needs to be content. So I mentioned infrastructure, healthcare, and economic tools. What are those tools? So right now there's going to be tax reform on Capitol Hill. And in Puerto Rico, the unique situation of Puerto Rico being U.S. citizen workers, but an international tax jurisdiction. If that isn't addressed, Puerto Rico could lose a little pharmaceutical and manufacturing that is the biggest employer aside from the government. So in terms of sustainability, part of the argument on the energy grid is that it needs to be able to absorb renewable energy. Right now, the grid has obviously collapsed, but there's only 2% of renewable energy in Puerto Rico before the hurricane. So yeah, that definitely needs to be there. And there needs to be economic empowerment for Puerto Rican businesses to actually flourish. So there are a lot of other like specific policy pieces, for example, a community development block grant, the nutritional assistance. There's a flexibility for a cash portion that Puerto Rico gets, the state don't, because there's no ATMs, the banks are out, so we need the cash. And there's also a program, you in New York are probably familiar with LIHEAP. LIHEAP helps people in the states that are cold to get money to help for fuel, for heating. And in Puerto Rico, I discovered this when I worked in the government. We get it for air conditioning to pay for the PREPA bill. But there's no PREPA bill because there's no electricity. So
there's PREPA bills. People are getting bills.
They're not supposed to pay them, but leaving that aside, I made a recommendation to several members of Congress saying, look, why don't you accelerate LIHEAP funding for Puerto Rico, but instead of paying for PREPA bills, have them use that money to pay for the diesel that's powering all the power plants in the hospitals and homes and the community centers. So yeah, there's a lot of specific policy recommendations, SBA loans that can become done.
That's on my point.
I manage LIHEAP. You should ask for kerosene. I oversee a department that has LIHEAP.
Okay.
Maybe asking for kerosene payments.
Let's talk offline so we can follow up on that.
So I'm going to ask for just a moment. Federico, is it possible for you to create a document that then Centro would be able to put on their Centro so that we can all access it, rather than people trying to get to you on specifics? Is that a possibility of what the Marshall Plan is, what you're proposing, and giving us detail? Because it's really hard, at least for me, to go back to Holyoke, rally people and say, call Congress around the Marshall bill without having those specifics. Would you be able to do that?
Sure. I mean, there's letters we've written to the president with a lot of specifics, and I'm happy to share those.
And maybe those Centro would be able to also.
Yeah, and any suggestions to add on to it, because like I said, it's specific enough so people can rally around it, but general enough so that we have wiggle room and
we need more
space
detail,
for more
though.
ideas. Yeah.
It is a great, it's a great way for us to rally around it. It was you, I understand.
So, but for you, we're looking for specific recommendations for the end.
Yes,
So
that's the task of all of us.
So it seems to me that one of the recommendations would be that whatever it's decided, it has to come with input from Puerto Ricans. And if it's imaginable, whatever policies are we going to go and ask Congress for, have to be the fruit of the conversations and the participation of Puerto Ricans. It's not everybody just deciding and going to ask, but there has to be participation.
Point of clarification, when you say Puerto Rican, just like Boricua.
But
are you talking about
everybody,
people on the
yes,
land?
also people on the island. There are many community organizations that are there that are already working, that have been working with these issues for many years, and this is the time for them to have a voice. So
we're going to ask Federico to work with them. How much more time? Who's doing time here?
5 minutes.
I got 5 more minutes. Dale.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't have too much time, so I got to get to the point. But I have my great concerns. I'd like to put a recommendation, and because of time, but getting to the point is one question I have to ask. Has anyone heard on this petition that I got from California? And it was stating that every congressman should, every citizens, that every congressman should put the attention of 2 priorities of Puerto Rico. 1 is the hurricane, and 2 regarding promesas. Has anyone got one? Anybody got here? Because I did. And it came from California here. If anyone is interested and is not conflicted in terms of that, or if you know about it, please let me know. If not, you can give me your email. If you give it to me, you write it down. I give it to you, and then that way you could check it out, because they have 85%. And when I read it, I said, oh my goodness. I had to call them. I said, what? what are you doing? And that's it.
Let me address that really quick. So on Promesa, I agree with everything that Jaime said. I lobbied against Promesa myself. Unfortunately, we didn't win. But I wouldn't advocate to reopen Promesa right now. Let me tell you why. I have a lot of intelligence from people that work on the Hill. There's a lot of bondholders that want to reopen Promesa to improve it, but to give more power to the control board and less power to Puerto Rico. And I think that would open up a Pandora's box. So if judicially we could get some debt reduced, that would be great. But legislatively, we reopen the Pandora's box to have the Trump administration put in more power to the board would be devastating.
That would be a guess.
We also have many people. We also have many people on the line that are asking for a very specific about the DC action. So you're receiving those.
Yeah.
Is it DC the march? Is it DC at the National Cemetery?
So where can we find information about the DC event? Interested in DC event as well? Any information would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, I have some information on that.
So, could you stand up quickly so that those that are listening and watching on the live stream, they would be able to know?
I'm going to contact these folks. Let me see. I got
Can you
the-
give us a date and or
it's
website?
It's the 19th, and I do have a website if I can find it very quick.
Unity March for Puerto Rico.
Unity March for Puerto Rico. That's correct.
I'm sorry, can you say that
Unity
louder?
March for Puerto Rico.
Unity
March for Puerto
Unity.
Rico. If anybody's from New Jersey, I'm one of the state organizers.
So Unity March for Puerto Rico,
That-
December 19th.
No,
November 19th. November 19th.
You can find them on Facebook. It's Unity March for Puerto Rico. You can find it on Facebook. They have an event and everything, and they have state organizers. They're putting them up. November 19th, Puerto Rico Discovery Day. You can't forget it.
I just
I'm
want to
sorry.
lift up another.
I just want to be respectful. You asked a question, you made a comment. Was there something else you wanted to say?
No, like I
You're
said,
good?
No, just the other point of action regarding that is, you can check out it if you like this communique and you can read it. But the second point of time is I was making a recommendation of my thought, I'm thinking. I think that right now, when I've been going different places in New York City and I observed the art, everything, and I said, wait a minute, why is it every time we put the music, we put the salsa? Da, 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 da. And when you're promoting, when I was circulating things, the music was loud. I was thinking if it's possible that we pick up a song, whether it be typical song of Puerto Rico, that would give the message that when people hear it on TV, on the radio, whatever, that's our song. That is message, if possible, speaking to the Lord. For example, the best recent song that I heard, that I like, which when I related, but he's from a person from Jamaica, it says, wake up. I can't say, wake up.
Stand up, yeah, Bob Marley.
So if we could find a song.
Get up, stand up, yeah.
Exactly, a song, that would be our theme. That would be the power of the people, because cada vez es salsa, salsa,
So we're talking
salsa.
about branding,
You know.
right? So like this, people get it. Go right ahead, dear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Charlotte, I just want to lift up, I came back from 3 weeks in Puerto Rico yesterday.
Welcome.
And thank you, I'm working there just because the title here is Grassroots Advocacy. I just want to lift up the amazing work that grassroots organizations and groups that just formed after the storm were doing. And encourage that one of the things that we can be doing in the diaspora, instead of collecting material goods, which are being taken by FEMA and the government and still being held at this point are really expensive to get there, is to donate directly to those very small grassroots collectives, because the grocery stores in the metropolitan area are now beginning to be filled with supplies again. So if you donate funding directly to them, they can access supplies, and then shipping the lighter things or sending them with people. But the mass collections, it's really hard. They get there, and then these collectives, unless you have a 501c3 status, unless you have a lawyer really helping you to get them out, they're not getting out. But there are groups that are taking over abandoned buildings and creating community centers out of them, who are taking food and creating sustainable community kitchens there. If you look up on Facebook, los Centros de Apoyo Mutuo, or los Comedores Sociales de Puerto Rico, the Maria Fund is going to be funding some of those groups, but it is not itself a grassroots organization there. There's la Colectiva de Feministas en Construcción. There's El Hormiguero that's taken over.
Brigada Solidaria,
La Brigada, thank you. There are a lot of different Centros de Apoyo Mutuo. They are feeding people, hundreds of people every day. La Olla Común and Rio Piedras, they need funding funding to be able to continue to buy that food. They are receiving some of the donations that are coming here from New York. And that's in addition to the nonprofit organizations like Salud, who are doing fantastic work out there, like Corporación de Caño Martín Peña, with the Enlace project there. They are doing fantastic work. And I think one of the things that we can be doing is driving money at this point into those organizations so they can get what they need on the ground to do their work, unless we're going to go there.
Thank you very much. So we have 1 minute. What I would like to do is, again, you're going to stay here hopefully all day. Please connect. The 3 recommendations that I have heard loud and clear is to be able to get on to November 19th and get over to Unify Puerto Rico demonstration. To be able, the Marshall Plan, Federico, you're going to do some work and be able to inform all of us and all of our connectors. And the third one is stop collecting donations in terms of material articles. We need to be able to send the money to organizations. You know how to do the research. You know the ones that are on the ground. Perdona? Grassroots organizations. Thank you. We got to be clear about that because there's a lot of political stuff that's going on. We don't want to get caught up in that. And we want to be able to get the money to the organizations that are making the difference. I need to stop. I'm not going to get in trouble with Edwin. I thank you so very, very much.